Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of No Bull with Nobu, the All-American Shaman. Nobu, how are you feeling today?
Good. Thanks for having me, brother.
Thanks for being here. Got some new background. Can you tell us where you're at? It looks like a little more nature and trees in the background. What do we got going on out there?
Yes, I am in Huntington County, Pennsylvania, in a very remote area, and it is beautiful. Me and my nephew have been working on the land here, splitting logs, chopping on trees, working on an old school hunting cabin built in 18, the 1800s, well, 1900s. I
Nice.
forget how that hundreds works, but yeah, it's been a lot. It's been fun though.
Very cool. Get that time outside. I'm soaking in those biophotons, huh?
I am looking quite tan despite wearing black.
There you go. All right. What are we going to get into today for our episode?
Power versus force, truth, and scales of consciousness.
Excellent. All right. So where do we want to start? Which three of those do you think is the best foray into this?
Truth.
Truth with a capital T, truth with a lowercase t. Is there a difference?
No one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. Um, the very nature, again, as we've talked about a lot in this podcast, of like we talk about like Bufo with like the frequency of like the high level downloads, right? Don't resonate when people are at lower frequencies, right? This comes back to a quote by, I believe it's either Euripides or Diogenes, I've said it before, but talk sensitive fools, and they will say that I am foolish, right?
Right.
Um, and then furthermore, again, like as Yeshua said, ignorance is the worst of all sins, and then furthermore, forgive them for they know not what they do. So, and furthermore, you can look at in the Bible of when angels would appear to humans, they would often say, be not afraid, but humans would still cower and flee from angels because, again, the frequency difference. If one is a vampire and demonic and filled with rotting flesh and demonic forces in the temple, then the presence of a very high frequency holy being can be quite abrasive to where they're at. And again, not judgment, just pattern recognition. Been there, done that. Uh, I went through exorcisms as a child, and I've also again had to go through. I will never stop purifying and exercising myself as well to reach higher levels of purification. But like I remember, even in recent years, there was times where I went to church or I went to sweat lodge, and there was an aversion to going into it, or again, hesitation sitting with combo, which again I know logically and from firsthand experience that these things are the truth and they are healing and they are high frequency. But again, anything within me or around me that is not, up at that level is going to be afraid, right, of those
Right.
things because it's going to purge it out. It's going to, set it on fire.
Interesting. I guess I didn't really connect that dot until now as far as is vibrational state and like the higher vibration states, like you're mentioning, like Bufo and some of these different psychedelics kind of raise your vibration to these other dimensions. Is like higher vibration equal to closer to truth?
Yes. Yes. The higher the frequency, the closer it is to truth. And going back to like the scales of consciousness point for a bit as far as truth goes, Dr. David Hawkins is the work I'm referencing in context to most of this. But he's written several amazing books delineating this concept. And the method he uses and Percival uses muscle testing. If we have someone extend their arm out, to where again it's the most mechanically disadvantaged position, and it's like my name is Nathaniel, my name is Nobu, my name is Susie. My arm, my shoulder gets weaker in the presence of lies, and they've done tests as well with this of where they have people take sugar versus an artificial sweetener, and people will be stronger. You know, not we can do this with actually like muscle, sensing device as well, like seeing how well the muscles are firing, how much electricity is being activated and generated. And humans are stronger, we are stronger in the presence of truth compared
Um,
to a lie or a falsehood. And again, there's different levels of it, right? New levels, new devils, new, vices and demons and other energies to overcome to get to higher levels.
That's interesting. So the muscle testing, and I've definitely heard of that before, as far as like it's kind of a lie detector or truth identifier. But I guess the mechanism at play there is, since your body is kind of this electronic and um, auric and other energy level system that is responding to the environment. If you're hearing something that is truth and it's more coherent and it's more resonant with your higher state of being, then you'll have inherently more strength to keep your arm straight against that resistance. Whereas if you hear a lie, then you'll like basically get out of sorts for a moment and you'll lose that strength. And then but also I've kind of heard that it works even if you don't necessarily know the answer. Is that also true? Because like your higher self maybe knows it.
Absolutely correct. And this principle also, again, as we talked about before about why psychedelics are powerful in terms of, you know, increasing the overall amount of brain, nervous system functioning and activation and awareness. But pendulums, operate off the same principle of you're tapping in your subconscious mind. So like I may not be able to consciously like look at a rock and know if it's real or fake just off of my own, three-dimensional five sensory organs. But using again like subconscious means, just like I've determined people's, when they were born, what time, if they don't have their birth certificate, by using their body, like people will also lean forward. Again, subconsciously, they'll lean forward in presence of truth, but people will recoil and go backwards, in the face of a lie.
Hmm. Interesting. And so that, yeah, you're kind of tapping into, is it like the universal consciousness energy there, or is it more of like you were able to sense it as yourself, like the rock example, like you could have a fake rock or a real rock in front of you. Is it that your body in like your present moment was able to kind of discern the truth there, or is it like you're kind of tapping into the one is all is one, and you kind of are that rock, so that so that's how you know it, that if it's real or not.
I would say it's both. I mean, the body has an intelligence again, just as the body always wants to heal itself. It doesn't want to be in a state of sickness, but also again, that other part as well, tapping into the collective energy. Because again, everyone's connected. So the separation is always an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of maybe pivoting back to truth. And this was in, I think, the yamas or the niyamas, those tenets in like the yogic tradition of like the kind of the greatest goods and sort of frameworks to live your life by. And honesty and like speaking the truth is like number one or number two, and then the other one is do no harm. And the way it was described to me is that do no harm typically goes ahead of speaking the truth, just because of more like social um, impacts or implications. If my wife walks in and says, "Do I look fat in this in these jeans or something?" It's like, no. Even if she does, I'm not going to say she does, because that's going to hurt her feelings, and you don't want to do harm by hurting someone by speaking a truth that they might take offense to or whatnot. Do you think about that as far as kind of as you're going about your daily life? And we've said this before as well. I think that speaking the truth in times of oppression or certain political situations can actually be dangerous. So how do you think about that as far as truth being safe or unsafe?
I can't remember the exact verse, but what comes to mind is from the book of Matthew of I come not in peace, but with a sword. And sword is word. Again, words can hack and slash. And in my deepest core, I believe that no matter how unpalatable or hard to digest and process a truth may be, that it still needs to be spoken. Because again, the lesson will continue until the teaching has been learned. So when we deprive others of, the truth, or at least the version of the truth that we are able to see, right? Again, going back to like what I said before, like almost all of us know someone or ourselves have emotionally eaten at any point. You know, I personally, from my warrior mindset from being a Marine, wrath, that aggressive truth, that masculine energy is needed. If one of my Marines is out of shape, not cleaning their rifle properly, and not keeping up on their knowledge, then to not tell him that he's unsat and not up to par and the standard is actually the most loving thing I can do for him, myself, and the rest of the men, right? Because it's going to keep him alive and the rest of us alive because we're only as strong as our weakest link.
Mm.
Um, and that's again why I went back to like no one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. When I was meritoriously promoted out of boot camp, the reason I remember I can't remember his name, Staff Sergeant. I can see his face like it was yesterday. I can't remember his name. He said, everyone was butthurt that I got meritoriously promoted. And he said, you know why Kaufman's getting promoted? Because he's an asshole. That's what he said. But when he said asshole, what he's really saying is like, I'm willing to say it and do the things that other people aren't, right? I'm willing to be viewed as, an asshole or an aggressive person because of my discipline. And again, going back to the word discipline, discipline is the highest form of self love or love we can give others, right? Because it's aligning people actually on their path towards their highest calling and or their highest good and highest potential. Whereas what do we think of when we think of a deadbeat father? Someone who doesn't, feeds their kids garbage, doesn't discipline them, doesn't teach them things, doesn't make sure they stay, in the proper moral and ethical alignment. And so people will try to run away and hide from the truth. But again, the truth will set you free.
Yeah. Yeah, that phrase definitely was in the back of my mind too on, just I think the ability to live by speaking the truth and speaking honestly means you don't have to keep up with your own web of lies. You don't have to remember things that you said to one person that were not true, and then like, oh, what was it? What was that lie that I told them? So I can keep the story consistent and not be exposed for being a liar. Um, but it may be on the opposite experience as far as like results with in a hierarchical situation and being like quote unquote the asshole or speaking the truth. In one of my jobs, I was a project manager and the project was going very poorly. And my manager was kind of like concealing the fact that it was not going well and saying that everything was fine. But then she went on vacation for a while and I started speaking the truth about the state of things and people got very mad because then it was then brought to light that mistakes had been made and that things were not going well and like we needed to reassess and like a lot more work or effort needed to be put toward it. And I don't think that was ultimately beneficial for my career in that role. Although I do think it earned me the trust of everybody that was kind of subordinate, which kind of gave me more street cred, I guess, against my or amongst my coworkers. But as far as like the management and the hierarchy and this kind of leadership level, they kind of held it against me ever since it happened. And luckily, I left that I left that team and now on a different one that I think actually appreciates speaking the truth. But maybe you can speak to why those dynamics come into place where they would want to quell or quash any truth speaking.
So again, like you said about things coming to light, a lot of people want to keep their secrets or they want to, keep up a false image. Or I can't remember, I think it was Oscar Wilde who said, how sad I was when I realized everyone was wearing a mask and, I wasn't, because a lot of people want to stay within the safety of the illusion of safety within their lives. Right. And again, this is also part of how like Machiavellianism of where people are glorifying within the subliminal and field community of like anything that makes you dark triad of where, narcissistic, psychopathic, because again, in order to be at a high level success within the material, again, and then the material aspect of things is largely satanic in terms of not being spiritual, of trying to beat God on earth in this lifetime, uh,
Mm,
accumulating riches and wealth and power, is based upon, again, lie, cheat, steal, root chakra things that I told you before, and I have experience with very intimately, where there is no empathy, there is no heart space because people in that frequency will not hesitate to backstab, betray, lie, cheat, steal because they don't have connection to everyone else. Because if they did, they would again, I know this sounds crazy to other people because again, truth is a frequency, but going back to like the thou shalt not kill or do no harm. This also applies again to animals, right? Thou shalt not kill in the Bible seems to be just glazed over as like, well, it's just people. Like, no, it's do not kill, period. Like that
Mhm.
there wasn't any sort of addendum to that of like it was thou shall not kill. But people again want to twist things to be satisfactory within their paradigm instead of again pushing up to the next level. And again, a lot of my journey has been, and as very much as a Sagittarius, shoots the bow, the arrow looses, and when the arrow lands, run over there, pick it up, we're at a new frequency, shoot it again, and keep going higher. Um, I'm gonna go touch back on your note of like the the dress or like does this make me look fat or other things. There's a big difference between in the delivery of things, right? Um, using how you're using your voice, how you're what words you're using, how you're delivering your message. And people will always be able to sense, they may not be able to like logically articulate it, but people will be able to sense when your intentions are good, right?
Mhm.
Like, Jason, I'm gonna use you as context. Like he's had multiple concussions and he still wants to play football and do other things. And me and his other uncle were saying, like, listen, like you really need to be we're concerned about you with some things. And it's not because we hate him or we want to like berate him. It's because we want to shine light on this situation because we care about him in his long-term development, which again might not be pleasant to hear. It's not something he probably wants to hear, but it's something that he needs to hear. Again, one of the phrases I think to myself all the time is like, if not me, then who? Right? If I don't tell someone about again, I've said this so many times again. Cancer is parasites, yeast, fungus, mold. It's not this. It's not what the media and the modern medicine tries to tell you it is. Because again, the cures are out there. We've talked about it before, and we've been censored. Again, that goes back to truth as well. No one is more hated than he who speaks the truth. Because often, most things within our society um, feed off of lies and deception and corruption, right? So anyone who goes against that grain to that matrix and set of Agent Smiths is a direct threat to the system that is harvesting energy and suffering off the population.
Mm. Yeah, man, we could go down this rabbit hole pretty pretty deep right now. I think it's a good segue into the scales of consciousness conversation. I've been, I guess, served up a lot of these different types of theories and predictions about the scales of human consciousness increasing more recently, and now because human evolution and just our abilities to spiritually grow and have more and more humans that are on a path of self actualization, um, because our own vibrations and our own light is able to shine more on an individual level and maybe like the number of individuals that are pursuing that path. Now, all this darkness that's kind of been in place that have built these societal structures to, make us sick and keep us separated and isolated and things like that. Like it's being exposed. Like after COVID, just the number of people that have kind of realized what was going on. Like, whereas in the past, I think a lot of the government planned diabolical events were perhaps not questioned or not really known to be as ill intentioned as they were. So, like, maybe what are your thoughts as far as where we are as a society now? Maybe just in the U.S. or also globally. Like, do you see humans evolving? And kind of reaching these higher levels of consciousness to kind of break or dissolve more darkness in the coming years.
I choose to see. I mean, I don't turn a blind eye, and I don't. use ostrich medicine in terms of the darkness. Again, talking about jaguar seeing the dark. Um, but again, in terms of where I like to place my attention mostly is on those who are, choosing to elevate and ascend. However, again, and well, this goes back to another thing with scales of consciousness. For the scale of 0 to 1,000 isn't linear; it's logarithmic. So 200 is actually 100 times more intense than 100, and 300 is 100 times more intense than 200, so on and so forth. So the scales of consciousness by Dr. David Hawkins then mathematically illustrates that one avatar figure, so like a Yeshua, Krishna, Buddha figure at 1,000, their frequency is so high that it's able to pull up, you know, tens of thousands up just by their presence and their existence, right? Someone, and as the kids today would say, it's like he has mad aura. Like, again, but again, like that aura, that influence, that ability, because again, being that like an angel, of having that just sheer luminescent, getting goosebumps talking about this, having that sheer luminescent light to oneself, again, shines light on others, which again, if you're solo, you're not going to catch a tan. You might get burned, which again, I've talked before about how a lot of humans
Mm.
can't even be out in the sun, which is a very good physical analogy for how people react to truth or individuals who are operating at a higher state of consciousness. And again, because I don't want to seem holier than thou, like I remember when I first started into spirituality and I was watching Sadhguru, I was thinking to myself, like, I remember I was watching it and I was like, this guy is freaking full of himself. Like, this guy is an asshole. Like, the way he's saying things and he's just laughing about it. But now, like, a couple more years down the road, I'm like, dude, spot on. He's just, he's laughing again. Where I was at before, again, he was talking sense and I was the fool and I thought he was foolish.
Mm.
So, you know,
Mhm.
this is where in the cognitive dissonance and the ego that comes out to play when we are faced with someone of a higher frequency or truth, knowledge, what have you, it may not resonate. Which going back to the whole, being gentle and doing no harm, if I try to take a caterpillar out of its cocoon early to make it a butterfly, I'll kill it. If I
Right.
try to grow a seed faster and open up its case past its germination period, a baby, what have you, there is a timeline for things. But I also do believe that planting a seed, and I've experienced it myself. Again, like I told you how for years people were telling me like you need to drink ayahuasca, and it pissed me off, and they were right. Like they were absolutely correct. Or when I remember people were telling me like you should be vegan or like you're eating a lot of meat, and I was so deep in my suffering and rage and whatnot, I couldn't see, I couldn't hear, I couldn't resonate with the truth that was impacting me. Um, so went off a little bit there. Does that answer everything?
Yeah, I guess the maybe one of the parts of the question was like, as a species, do you believe that kind of humans are on a scale like to evolve, or has it kind of just been flat or like up and down throughout our history?
I think it's gone through different waves. Um, but I do believe that currently we are overall on an upward trend, which is also why the diabolical plans of, well, this is going to be great. See what YouTube says. World Health Organization, Bill Gates, all the scripting that occurs within like the Simpsons and other television shows of where in media where they're literally like telling people, desensitizing them to further levels of bullshit, right? And actually, at church this Sunday, Pastor Joseph was just talking about how, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was making the world believe he didn't exist, right?
Right.
And, he asked, well, not him, but another pastor, and other pastors and people have done this as well, like asking AI, like, if you were the devil, like, how would you, destroy the world or corrupt humanity? And it's like, divide the family, which look what's happened in the country as far as like different politics and different things. I'd put them on a phone, I'd distract them, I numb them, I give them endless sorts of entertainment, entrainment. Ment is mind in Latin. So entertainment is entrainment, just a little bit of spelling, spell casting. right there in
Mm,
plain sight. Television is tune in for your daily program, and people, again, over time, they don't realize that they've fallen so far from grace. And again, speaking from experience, when I was a boy, my heart was so wide open that I used to bawl my eyes out just watching Little Bear and seeing injustices. But then as I became hurt more and more, hurt people, and so then I
mm,
went in my period of darkness. But um, have you ever heard of Project Looking Glass?
if I did, I don't remember.
There's a YouTube channel called Inspiring. Also, David Icke, David Icke, is a good SME subject matter expert on this, of where they talk about how the elites, archons, and other such entities and cabals and groups know they look. Project Looking Glass was a government project where they essentially created a machine to look into the future and see things. And what they saw was that in 2030 there would be a great awakening within the
Mm,
collective consciousness. And so everything, like COVID was a test run. COVID was a test run, psyop of seeing how much compliance could be achieved through different fear mongering tactics and, again, whatnot. Which I knew that was a freaking psyop to begin with. And Mexico wasn't in on it because they were like, I remember driving across the United States from New York down to Cabo San Lucas, and the United States, again, the most powerful country in the world, but really one of the ones just orchestrating the plot. I could drive through every state without going through checkpoints or anything. But Mexico, who wasn't and isn't in the elite, popular boys and girls club, they thought it was real. Because when I went to Mexico, every time I went to a different province or city, I had to get my temperature checked before entering and leaving. You know,
mm,
but we could, so but the United States, it was just all facade, right? Like, the gyms were closed and the beaches were closed and the parks were closed, but then the bars were open, the dispensaries were open, and
right.
like, connect the dots, people. Like, so I think that again, things are going to continue. The attempts by the darker forces are going to continue to amp up in attempts to stop and slow down, prevent what is destined to come. And then furthermore, we are also in the age of Aquarius, which uh, comes down to um, distilling down to truth. But we have to go through this final purge stage of lies. That's why things are getting more and more obscene, obscure. Like, people don't even know what's true online nowadays, right? They think
Uh-huh.
it's AI. And we're going to see greater levels of this deception, darkness, lies, and whatnot before we reach the apex ready for truth. Just as within the microcosm of someone's plant medicine journey, there's often a lot of going through the darkness of purging and, you know, exercising, releasing different energies before they get to, the climax or the peak or the summit. You're just like a mountain. Um, you have to go through those valleys. And, I think for the collective consciousness, it's the same as well. We have to collectively purge to reset.
Mm. Dang, yeah, there was a lot you touched on in that one. Um, maybe like a quick question I could say, or you could give your perspective on as like an individual going through these next few years, maybe up to 2030, when like all of these more intense, perhaps tests or other diabolical plans get put into place. I mean, I know during COVID, it's like even the folks that kind of maybe saw through the bullshit and realized that it was kind of like a test to see how obedient and compliant we were going to be. Like there were still real consequences. Like folks were losing their jobs, and they were sending like the military out to different cities and like tear gassing people's homes, and like on their front porch if they were sitting out there, they were like hitting them with like beanbag bullets and stuff like that. Like, so you don't necessarily want to get killed by the machine, if getting through to the other side means just kind of like keeping your head down. I mean, maybe it's ostrich energy in the short term, but then to live to fight another day, or how do you look at that there?
As someone who is Ashkenazi Jew, German Jew by bloodline, the shenanigans piss me off to my very core, because my ancestors were slaughtered and systematically killed because they just went along and kept their heads down out of their own selfish survival root chakra instincts. Again, that's what the fear mongering, all these things do is they push people down in their consciousness. Well, don't be a hero. Don't speak the truth. Don't open your mouth. Like play along, get along. Again, like look at Star Wars. Same sort of thing of like, you know, people who are rebels will get sold out, and because again, they're trying to squash the resistance. Um, I I don't buy into the and like I remember so many times like seeing on TV about school shooters or mass shooters, and I know that not everyone is a warrior at heart. I'm aware of this, but my warrior heart that sees those scenarios like if there's 100 people and there's one person with a gun, if all of you run towards the threat, yes, some of you may get cut down. Yes, that is something that may happen. However, you will annihilate that one fool. Like you have the power within the herd. But again, the herd of sheep often again are all thinking, acting out of their own self-interest. And that's why
Mm,
it's critical that there be men like our ancestors who founded this country over a 3% tax on tea and picked up rifles and went to war with the most powerful empire on the planet and won, right? And people nowadays will just bend over and get slammed by taxes, licenses, registration, all this BS that didn't exist before because, well, I don't want to get arrested or I don't want to cause a fuss, so I'll just go play along to get along. And
mhm,
I, no, it's bullshit. Like people need to grab their stones again, just as you've seen with me. Like I don't shy away from a fight, and I don't give in to fear, whether it be someone trying to threaten me, trying to dox me. Like nobody doxes Nobu harder than Nobu, anyways. Uh, like I'm an open book, and I've been very transparent with people on like who I am and what I've been through. So I think it goes back to truth. When you walk in integrity, you have nothing to fear, right?
mm. Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful stuff. Maybe that's a great segue too on force versus power. Could you kind of describe that? I feel like the force aspect seems to be what the machine relies upon, and the intimidation and things like that. But you're drawing a distinctive line there between maybe true power and what is maybe seen as power but is really force.
Hmm. Yeah, power, again, going back to like soul retrieval and shamanic aspect. When someone is powerful, they have integrated their various totems and they are resonating with them, and they are whole. They are holy. It's also in the word whole as well as holy. Whereas and just being, right, again going back to that, avatar figure, someone high in the scale of consciousness, just by being themselves, not having to actively go out and really do all that much in terms of making moves. They're able to have a exert influence again through their field, their aura, and their sheer frequency. Again, just as the sun is just really just the sun isn't really actively engaging with us, right? I mean, it is like with flares, but I mean, just the sun being the sun is doing so much for everything. Yeah, it's holding the solar system in place within their different gravitational pools. It's providing, heat and light for the planet. Force, on the other hand, of manipulation, coercion, of trying to intimidate, trying to, all these different tactics of pushing, pushing people and hurting them towards certain things. Whereas again, power just is. You just have your own gravitational pull to where things, again, this also lines up with synchronicities and like, divine timing and alignment. You don't just, you know, like you are a classic case of like power for me. Like didn't force you to do this. You just wanted to. It just aligned. Many things in my life I've seen where it just was because doing the right thing and things fall into place. Not whereas the times where I've tried to force things and make things happen a certain way and be attached to that and trying to exert that energy, again, it can come back. it can come back to you. And that's also where karma comes into play. And this comes back to like Lao Tzu of like the path of inaction as well.
Mm. It's almost like you're letting the higher power that's within each and every one of us shine through and do the heavy lifting, and really just like removing your ego out of the way. Um, because that's like, the force aspect probably comes in with the ego and wanting to have control and trying to manipulate others into doing what you want them to do and exerting your will. Whereas, was it "Thy will be done" in the Lord's Prayer? That's like where the true power comes from. Of you're, I think another one of these yoga tenets is like you're entitled to your work, but you're not entitled to the fruits of your labor. So like God is the one taking the fruits of the labor and distributing them as that higher power sees fit, and you're entitled to your work, so you get to feel accomplished and feel productive and kind of help your fellow man through your efforts. But ultimately, the most level of success and impact would be from just letting the universe flow through you and being that channel for the infinite power.
Precisely. And then this comes back right to my shamanic work as well, as far as like going into a trance state, whether it be through drumming or singing, dancing, or psychedelics, is I just become the vessel, the conduit for what needs to occur. I don't plan out before a session like, oh, I'm going to use rattles, or I'm going to use my drum, or I'm going to use my piano, or I'm going to rock. You've heard me rhyme and sing many times. Like, I don't know. It just again flows through me because it's for that person. I become the conduit. Um, which means again, I have to get myself out of the way, which a lot of
Mhm.
people have a really hard time of doing that. Or again, when they're faced with someone who's not doing that, because if I just tell someone again something they need to hear out of just because I'm intuitively just feels like I need to, or it feels like the right thing, versus the force aspect of like, well, I want this person to do this, so I'm going to play chess and manipulation, all the Machiavellianism. Like,
Yeah.
it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think some great kind of like easy examples of that are like when someone's giving a speech, if they just kind of wing it and speak from the heart, it's always like the best speech you could ever listen to, because it's authentic and it's true and it's meaningful and heartfelt. But then if someone's like thought for months of what they're going to say and they write it down and then they're like reading it or trying to memorize it, it's always the most painful experience ever to try to listen to that. And another. I guess it was on that cartoon Rick and Morty when they have that like rock and roll contest with like those big heads from outer space or whatever. They're like, show me what you've got, and they have to write like a banger song for like the game show, or otherwise planet Earth gets blown up. and and Morty's like freaking out. He's like, oh, how are we gonna write this song? And Rick's like, dude, you got to relax. Like genius happens in the moment. You just got to let it flow through you. And I think that's just great advice. It's like the more pressure you put on for something to be perfect, the more likely it is to suck. Whereas if you kind of just let the truth flow out of you, then odds are it's going to be something great. And you can't do anything but step away and like in that moment, just feel it out and do whatever comes, I guess. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, two things come to mind that are directly tied to this that I feel like are very powerful artistic expressions of this. First one, you already know. I'm going to say it anyways. A rock is still. A rock is silent. A rock does not kill. A rock is not violent. A rock stands fast. A rock runs true. A rock always lasts. A rock is me and you. And speaking in more three-dimensional terms, a stone, a rock has so much power in just being, right?
Mm,
Because when we think again, when we think about like a rock, like what that means, like between a rock and a hard place, rock, abuelitas and abuelitos are just being, and they are powerful just in that being. Not and from the humanoid perspective, it's like, well, they're not doing anything. But yeah, they're just being, and yet they're holding everything together. You know,
mm,
um, and the second thing is, I can't remember her full name, Alex. Sunshine Rose, but the song is I Release Control. Um,
Mhm.
I'll sing it real quick because it's I'll share a story afterwards about this. But I release control and surrender to the flow of love that will heal me. And it loops. But when I first started actively being a shaman, I remember I looped that song for like a week straight, and it was like putting myself egoically through an exorcism. Because at the
Mm,
time, there were so many things that I myself wanted and I desired, and I wasn't getting those things. And I was my ego, my sense of like this is how things should be, was extremely frustrated. And surrendering to the flow of love that will heal me will again healing, increased frequency, releasing control, letting go, enabling things to transpire according to God's plan, a higher power. Which again, going back to the demonic forces and the elites and etc., they want to become God. They don't want to surrender to God. And that is why such things are so abhorrent to them, because it takes them out of the seat of power, which really they've
mhm.
conflated as force. And on that note, was when I was in my car crash where I broke my ribs, as the vehicle was rolling, my Volkswagen Beetle, uh, I stuck my arms out and I started singing that song as I'm
Wow.
rolling. And again, I was fine, like you know, but a lot of people, they try to hold on. They tighten up on things. And again, if if you just surrender and let go, like it'll be fine. Like again, trusting God. Um, that's another thing to this country and the world in general. It's people have um forsaken God and try to step away and make new idols, false idols, and different thrones. But again, you can't escape that truth.
Right. Yeah, and it's also kinda like, I feel like even the word God and the concept, at least in this society, has been so tarnished by so many evildoers wrapping themselves in this false perception of what God is. And I forget kind of like where I heard this, but like the one of the biggest tricks that these dogma and like the church and the state, they convinced us that God was this like guy in heaven casting judgment down upon us, whereas the truth is closer to God is within all of us, and like his love and light can shine through any and all of us all the time if we just kind of allow it. So rather than just embracing this power that exists within us, we cower for this perceived overlord that is going to be smiting us with lightning bolts like Zeus or something like that. And so I think a lot of the politics of kind of taking God and using the Bible and saying like, "Oh, well, I'm on God's side, and that's why we have to go murder a bunch of people in this other foreign land." It's like, I think that's why it's so hard to have conversations about religion and spirituality and higher power, is just because there's so much baggage tied up with it that you're going to offend somebody just based on their own preconceived notions and what they're bringing to the conversation. So it's tough to um, yeah, it's tough to really get past that first that first sentence without someone just kind of immediately reacting and responding.
This is also why, going back to power versus force, right? Forcing in terms of evangelizing and trying to convert people, to any religion or dogma, just like the butterfly, or the seed, is potentially going to do some more harm than good, potentially. This is why, again, just being powerful, being in the truth and acting in accordance to the truth will yield the greatest benefit overall. You know,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Um, yeah, I was also going to say like Jesus changed the world because he changed himself and he became this like beacon of light and love. And I think the rest of history kind of after uh, he died is really it was on it wasn't on him. Like he wasn't out there saying like, "Oh, I need to start all these churches all around the world and this, that, and the other, and like all these rules and all these different things that are going to be categorized as sin or whatnot." But from what I could gather, his life was just about spreading the idea that love is the greatest good and just trying to be as compassionate and high vibration of a human as humanly possible. And thus he changed the world just by being that, and holding that and other people witnessing that.
Yes, you hit that nail on the head.
Yeah. I did want to circle back to the scales of consciousness. Just on like, could you maybe just describe like what they are? Like, do they correspond kind of to the chakras, or like what's that scale look like, and what are the labels of the x and y axes, perhaps?
If I recall correctly, love is sitting around halfway at 500. So, which is again, when we look down like below 100, we're looking at grief, suicide, self hatred, right? Because again, how far away from God and the truth does one need to be to want to, and I'm just, again, speaking from experience, I was suicidal for the better part of 20 years. I know that darkness, I know that pit very well. Um, but as we go up the scale, we get to go to compassion, we go to joy, we go to love, and then beyond love, like there's greater levels of service and of not committing harm and whatnot. But the fundamental, like the highest levels, again, is those avatar figures who are telling everyone else you can do the same thing as me, which again goes back because again, like you said, God is within all of us. Like all of us have the potential to be that, but people instead will take the easy, like even like of putting someone on a pedestal and of saying like we're going to worship this dude because he died on the cross, or we're going to worship this dude because he stared at a wall for 9 years, instead of like again, I tell you all the time, it's like that any good teacher should have their students surpass them. Like,
Mm,
truly. And so I really hope people can view anyone who is at a higher level at anything than them as an inspiration to do and be better, and not as this comparison and competition thing of like, well, oh, they're better than me, I'll never be as good as them or whatnot. And I hope those who are on a higher level in any capacity can see it as their duty, like Romans 15:1, those who are strong should suffer for those who are weak. Again, going back to the military, like you're only as strong as your weakest link. Again,
mhm,
all is one. So for someone to ignore someone else or to not help someone else who is suffering in any capacity is to not help themselves. Because again, we're
right.
all just God looking at each other through different fractals and forms.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's like bringing up, like you're kind of saying, like pulling people up as you can. Like then we can then get to the next level and then pull up further and get to the next level and get pull up further. Whereas the opposite of that is kind of like that crab bucket effect, where it's like, oh, we're all down here, and oh, you're trying to rise out and get out of this bucket. Well, I'm going to pull you back down. So that's that lower that lower vibe. Um, and maybe kind of on the materialism thing, just kind of circle back to that as well as like the denser frequency. Could maybe like touch back on that as far as like materialism is a almost like a philosophy, I guess, of just having these things that humans create, and the like, because they're dense physical objects that we've created, then they like kind of drag down on our consciousness in order, or I guess drag our consciousness down because like they're energetic ties to like a more tangible decaying entity. Or could you maybe just describe like that link between materialism and more like base energies?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there as far as like the attachment part. I was actually just telling my uncle earlier about how the things we own us, right? Uh, and so many people will idolize and put on a pedestal people who are very wealthy with material things, but have the more you have, the more you have to lose as well, and the
Mm,
more things that are attached to you. So the person who has an empire, has a million different ways in which they can suffer, right? Which again, life is suffering. The Buddha talked about this. It's the very nature of it. It's about finding meaning in that suffering. But the I met a man on a train ride once to a Bufo ceremony in California. Can't remember his name, but I remember I saw him in the back of the food cart, and he was just like staying by himself. And I spent years homeless. Like I know what homelessness looks like. And I went back to him and was like, and I said, how long have you been on the road? And he looks at me like, dude, I know what you're about. Like, you good? And he's like, oh, I'm waiting to ask for some food for some free after all this call because he didn't want to ask for food around other people. And I'm like, dude, come with me, like, okay, I'll get you food. And then I talked to him, and the dude had been spending, I want to say it was like 7 years with not even a wallet, a phone, a backpack, or a water bottle. And
mm,
this man would hop trains, and he would get off at towns and find churches, and the Lord provided for him. The universe, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, provided for him because he was at that appropriate frequency for serendipitous or otherwise miraculous events just to happen in his favor. Or, like when
mm,
Paul was put in prison in the Bible, that's when he wrote the book of Paul. So what was supposed to have been a contractive experience to stop him from, doing his work was actually the catalyst for him to do his greatest work. Um, and as far as again those denser things, the material is that people are so fixated on the distractions and the spikes and the pleasure, right? Again, going back to the hedonism and material things, that the idea of fasting, of doing without, the idea of praying, of just being in stillness and silence and or meditation, all these things that are free, that don't cost anything, that bring you closer to God in different ways. Dry fasting, water fasting, juice fasting. People say like, "Oh, I could never do that. Like, I have to have a steak or I have to have this." It's like they are enslaved by the very things that they put upon a throne, right?
mhm.
So, whereas the person, who's rich, the person who knows when enough is enough, right?
Right.
And I've told you this before, and I want to tell the audience this very clearly. We are currently in a stage of where we do need resources to develop, you know, the business and to be able to exert influence. If I just walked into a children's hospital right now and said, "Hi, I'm Nobu, and I would like to work on your stage 4 cancer patients," they would say, "You're freaking crazy. Get the hell out of here." So
Right.
I need to develop some level of clout or reputation or affluence to be able, and also again, like be able to have a salary to fund me traveling and doing those sorts of things. But I was just watching Joel Osteen. He's a pastor out of Texas, and it was an interview with Jake Paul or Logan Paul, one of those guys, and he doesn't take a paycheck or a salary from the church. All his money that he makes is from his books or like different tours he does. But his church, the ministry, again, God's work, doesn't pay him at all. He doesn't take a salary. And it's my goal again for us as well to get to that point eventually where it is a ministry where I'm not charging $220 for exorcisms, where it's free. If someone needs it, you ask, you get it. But currently, again, like there's been times where like, I don't want to even have money, or like I don't have food. So there's still like this transitionary phase. But again, I think that aligns perfectly with the scales of consciousness as well. Like we're not there yet, but I see it. I have the foresight, I have the bird's eye view to see that it is possible, even though to other people it may seem crazy. But again, it
Mhm.
goes back to actions over words. We'll make it happen.
Right. Right. And there's like the reality is like you can have such a bigger impact if you have resources in this world and be able to have reach and the funds to be able to go travel and set up different events or retreats or like you're saying, provide pro bono services to those that can't afford it. But if you have no resources to begin with, you'll not be able to really interact with anybody. So it's not really gonna help. So yeah, thank you for the fans out there listening and for your support. And looking forward to what we grow together with these endeavors to continue the healing and bring light as much as we can. So, anything else we want to touch on in this episode, Nobu?
Before you speak, before you act, no time to waste, no taking back. And I say that it's tattooed on my neck, but with a broken hourglass. But I say that with the context of truth. And I want everyone listening to really pay attention to what I say here. Is if you knew that the person you love or someone you love, you're aware of a negative pattern of behavior they do. Whether that's addiction, whether that's some sort of negative habit or activity they engage in, or what have you. If you're quiet and you don't say anything, and then you witness them again, like someone drinks and drives, and you don't say anything, or texts and drives, and you don't say anything, and then they die or kill someone else, like part of that blood is on your hands. I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm just being very honest because you have the opportunity to love your brother and sister as thyself. Like, would you want me to call you out if I saw you going down the completely wrong path? But if I just kept my mouth shut, like those people who don't call us out on our shit can be the worst enemies, truly. Um, which again goes back to that, I come not in peace, but with a sword. I will set a household against himself, the father against the mother against the son against the daughter. Is, at times, again, it may not be pleasant, but things need to get sliced up and, again, purged and brought to light so that way they can be reborn. Again, going back to Bufo, like death. Death and purging are not this bad thing. They are necessary. Just again, as your body regenerates its cells every 7 years. The same thing with people's activities, thought patterns, what have you. I am not the same person I was before. And I'm very grateful for all the ego deaths and all the purging and all the people too who, spoke, especially those father figures, those masculine energies who are willing to risk pissing me off or agitating me because they knew that was in alignment for my highest good. Um, yeah. So I urge everyone to carpe diem and seize the day when it comes to truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, it is uncomfortable, so I think it's good to have that reminder and come from that place. Like you said, intention is everything, and if you're coming from a place of love, yeah, it may sound harsh or critical or may hurt someone's feelings in the short term, but once they have some perspective and realize that you're coming from a place of wanting what's best for them, then it's like, you're not going to be an enabler. Like if you know someone has a drinking problem and you're not going to hand them a beer to then go get in their car and drive home, like that's that's not going to help anybody. So yeah, I think it's just a good reminder that as long as you take that conscious um, reflection as to where you're coming from with those words before you speak it to them, and know that it's coming from a place of love, then it can give you the confidence and conviction to say what needs to be said. Excellent, Nobu. Any final comments we want to leave the audience with here?
Well, just thank you.
Thank you, Nobu, and thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you next time.